Hello, beautiful micro-philosophical community. Imagine that you'd asked me what politics is. And we're going to talk about it properly on the main channel, actually, because it's something that we've just got to talk about in an accessible way. But this is a little corner where eventually we're going to have some borderline, professional philosophical content. So it's going to get geeky. So be careful what you're doing here. This is probably just for a couple of thousand people in the community. What we're going to do today is that I'm up. And when I'm up on the better days, I have a period where I function for a little bit. And then I go do some systematic resting to bring my symptoms under control. And then if it's a good day, I can start my day a bit, normally working from my table in bed. So it's one of those days. I just want to spend that little intermediate period after waking up and having my coffee with you on that question. So this is really a casual chat, not a kind of a presentation where I want to just, take 5 minutes of your time and give you everything I feel you deserve. This is going to be rambling. So all of these warnings aside, let's get into it. What is politics, Vlad? And my answer is, let's just slow down first and realize it's not embarrassing to go slow here, because on the one hand, you might think, well, hang on, our car mechanic is over and he doesn't know what a car is. So that's bad, isn't it? And you certainly don't want a political philosopher who doesn't know what politics is. But actually, your car mechanic is fine. If your car mechanic can't define what a car is, doesn't mean that they won't be useful. Just like somebody who works with elephants might not be able to define what an elephant is. So where I want us to start is, I think, probably to imagine a hypothetical scenario that includes, let's say, everybody watching this video, or let's say a fragment of people watching this video. And that's an experiment where we end up on an abandoned island, and we try to make do and try to sort of organize ourselves there. Have you ever been on an uninhabited island in the ocean? It's very magical. It's very, very magical, especially if you get stranded a little bit, but not too long. So let's say that there's 500 of us there. Some members of this community and their families. Say 100 members of this community and their families. And imagine all other humans, just for the hypothesis of this experiment, disappear. And imagine that we've got water and food and no imminent danger of that running out. And we've got the capacity to make some very basic tools. We can make fire. So whatever else is going to happen, the likelihood is we're going to be there a month from now. We're not going to disappear. When does politics begin on that island? Is it there already? Because these people are there. So they're trying to kind of live and get along, so surely politics is there, or is it not? Do they have to start sort of doing something or thinking something for politics to start? Politics, for me, and when I say for me, I mean, in my view, this is objectively true, not that this is how I feel, starts when we face the most basic political problem, and that is the problem of order. Roughly, how do you stop people from killing each other? And roughly, how do you generate enough peace, order, stability, cooperation for a human group to go on and have a sort of a minimally sustainable, organized life? But that's not it. It's when you try to solve that problem, when you address yourself to that problem via a solution, right, that is not just, or that is more than, merely successfully executed coercion. Humans begin political activity when they explore solutions to the basic problem of order that go beyond just successful power exercise. I love this Colombian coffee very much. So we're on the island. Imagine that actually 2 people on the island have firearms out of 500. And imagine they say, we don't just have firearms, we also have enough ammunition to basically run this place. And all of you, the other 498, are basically going to do what we tell you to do. And when you say, but what about this problem, how to organize the water situation, but what about this conflict between these 2 families here, but what about this challenge about these food resources? The answer comes back, we got guns, shut up. Stop talking and do a handstand, or else. Now, that's, as a kind of cartoonish paradigm for me, not yet politics. But even though I've just said this, it's immediately obvious how what I've just said can be challenged. Because surely, if these 2 people have guns and everybody else doesn't like it and is actually asking them, guys, how are you going to explain yourselves here? We don't find this acceptable. Why are you doing this? As soon as that happens, it's possible that the 2 people with guns sort of have a conversation. Well, we're just exercising power here. What more is there to it? But it is I suppose it's kind of a headache that they're all sort of complaining about it, and then none of them like it and they want to get rid of us. So should we at least discuss some of the complaints about our power exercise that they have, maybe just with a view to shutting them up a bit better? Or maybe we could just tell them some bullshit, that what we're doing is not mere power exercise. Or maybe we should just, not bullshit them, because it's obvious what we're doing to everybody anyway. Green shoots of politics are already appearing in that conversation. Now imagine another scenario where these 2 people with guns are appointed by Samantha. And Samantha has just been chosen because couple of hundred people out of the 500 just said, "Can Samantha be kind of a president of our island, just for a few months, and then we'll see, And we trust her, so she went. We'll be able to negotiate with her if we want somebody else to take her place. So it's Samantha. And then Samantha says to these two guys, "You guys, you got these guns. You can keep them, but do you want to sort of just be the police force of the island? So every time we've got some kind of a conflict, some kind of a problem, you can sort of come in and just enforce the rules that I tell you are our rules, and the rules I tell you are our rules here are, on the whole, mostly accepted by people at the moment. So that's kind of where we're at." And imagine that these two people with guns have issues with aggression and discipline, and they don't try to take the island over in any way, but they just dispense their duties in a very sort of irresponsible and erratic way. But they are kind of doing what they're supposed to do 60% of the time. So, when there is a conflict about whose water container is being, inappropriately used by someone, well, yeah, they come in and they sort of say, "No, actually that belongs to this family. And it doesn't belong to you. Yours is there. Maybe you need to fill yours up a bit more, and so on next time it rains. And if you keep stealing the water, we're gonna enforce some kind of a restriction on you. We're gonna put you in a cage." That's politics already. It's sort of, it's horrible, lazy, ugly politics. It's politics. What if we have a different situation where we decide that out of the 500, 400 are going to be slaves, and the 100 will be the slave owners, and the two people with guns will enforce this arrangement? Yeah, that's politics. It's a politics that is completely obscene to us, because almost the most basic ethical thing we feel in the modern world is that all human beings are of equal moral worth. I mean, we still don't quite feel that all the way down, but most of us partly feel it. I mean, notice, the average person in the Czech Republic or in Britain doesn't feel the same way about a family from Aleppo as they do about a family from Mariupol. I think there are many people in the West who don't distinguish. I don't distinguish. It doesn't make any difference to me. And I might prefer the family from Aleppo, in fact, because it's such a beautiful culture, and because it's a culture with a wonderful level of education, but it's also a culture that I recognize less. It's newer to me, and so if we were talking about my building being occupied by folks from Syria, Ukraine, I might prefer folks from Syria because I know the folks from Ukraine quite well already. But even the people who distinguish less, who distinguish more, rather, and who really do favor Ukrainians over Syrians by a long way, they still feel that every life matters on some level. They still do. And even if they don't as much as they could, they'll say that they do more than they do, and you get it. Even the most brutal genocidal dictator in the modern world tends to appeal to the fact that all lives are of equal moral worth. And on the rare occasions that's not the case. That's a kind of a radical evil that freaks us out. So back to the island, that extraordinary rate of exclusion, where we exclude 400 islanders and the 100 are sort of quote-unquote citizens and the rest are effectively just slaves or enemies because we just run them via coercion, we, if I'm among the 100. That's still politics. It's just a ghastly politics, but there's enough people there who have a political arrangement. That's to say that the relationship of the people with the two guns, the two people with guns, to the 100 who are not enslaved is a political relationship. It's a relationship that has transcended mere power exercise. So, basically, politics begins when the first political problem of order, how to get people from not killing each other and coexisting with a minimal level of cooperation, when that problem is solved via something that transcends mere coercion. When there is an attempt, or at least the semblance of an attempt, or maybe even the pretense of an attempt, to justify what's going on in terms that invoke authority and not just mere power. So when you are in the realm of those with power attending to potential questions about why they've got the power and what authority they've got to have it, right? When we get into that, and when we try to via that solve the most basic political problem of order, we're getting politics. So, I think, probably about 22, but two funny conclusions follow from this. Because, of course, when I say this to you, either it'll sound weird, what I've said, or it'll kind of sound sort of persuasive. But, of course, I am saying it against the background of everything else that one can say about what politics is. And that's, I think, the difference between people who think about this business professionally, is that they're mostly wrong, we're mostly wrong, but at least we make our errors against a knowledgeable background of what else there is for us to be said. You know, we're choosing a certain kind of vegetable and saying that's the one we're going for, but we know what all the other vegetables that are out there are. So what's missing from this sort of cartoonish picture of politics that I've given you, that it would be really unacceptable to a lot of people who take different conceptions of politics? I think I'm just going to say one thing that's really missing then, and add a little footnote rather than make the list longer. And that's that it's clearly missing from my picture that politics is applied morality. So there is a conception that I'm very much rejecting, that politics is moral principles applied to political practice. That's to say, moral principles applied to the relations of humans mediated by the institutions they share. I don't think that's how politics works. So my objection to that isn't just that that's not a political enough account of politics, and politics needs to start with this sort of quite real grounded situation of some people with power, other people asking them questions about their power, them answering them a bit, and then we go from there, rather than to some sort of principles that somehow is going to be applied. And that doesn't just miss what politics is, it misses actually what morality is too. So the problem I have with that view, that politics is applied ethics, isn't just that it misrepresents politics, but it misrepresents ethics too. Historically, in the West, there are two sort of rail tracks in terms of how people do moral philosophy, moral reflection. One says that basically morality emanates out of human psychology, the depth, complexity, conflictedness of human psychology is there, and out of that really comes moral life, and it's always very connected to the deepest account of human psychology we have. And then there's another story that doesn't start with psychology, that starts with certain rationally derived principles and says that, well, we arrive at those by various kinds of reflection. And then we sort of tie them to what human psychology happens to be, and maybe human psychology can't even catch up to them properly, but maybe it could, if only we were more rational than we are. So there is one sort of story that constructs a set of principles and says, oh, here we go. Then there's another story that says, no, we start with the human mind as it is. And that story that starts with our psychology is always more messy, more dense, and inevitably incompatible with any attempt to create a theory of moral life. So that kind of island situation very much starts us off in a different place to where people who want to think of politics as applied morality start us off. That's one thing. Let me just add a second thing that's quite interesting, that I think might be striking about the island situation. And that's that when a political authority drifts further away from being an authority toward just exercising mere power and not even trying to justify it in any way, just trying to get away with it, and what you've got is a sort of a practice of successful coercion, and not even an accompanying discourse that tries to masquerade it that much, well, that then ceases to be politics, or at least moves towards ceasing to be politics. And that's a very striking conclusion, because when we think of politics for the first time as children, in school, we immediately begin to think of the most dramatic political regimes, like Nazi Germany. But what I am saying is that if you look at the Nazis, obviously they were doing politics, but less so than we might think. Because if you've got a regime that is trying to do a lot of terrible things in secret, doesn't want to justify them, if you've got a regime that is, yes, using institutions that it inherited and trying to dramatize their power, but is also trying to sort of bypass the institutions and run a kind of a state within a state, whereby you've got a kind of a gang of people running the society, and the institutions are partly a facade. You're not at the point of, but you're moving toward a situation where what you're orchestrating is in large part a successful exercise in coercion. And therefore, what I'm saying leads to the conclusion that some of the most dramatic tyrannies are also perversions, evasions of politics. Evasions of good or bad politics, at least part of the way. So that's the other interesting conclusion, that to some extent regimes like that aren't doing bad politics, but aren't doing politics at all. I don't want to say they're not doing politics at all to any extent, but I'm saying to some extent they're evacuating political activity. So this is the beginning of a picture of human beings doing different things, and one of the distinctive human activities being political activity, and human political activity inevitably, whatever culture you're in, has a certain kind of shape to it. And it's very interesting what we've just said about the Nazis, because on a much smaller scale and with some differences, you have this state within a state story in Russia, which we talk about all the time. You've got a kind of a bypassing of institutions via a set of sort of informal mafioso-like relationships and hierarchies. And that's a fascinating story about the evacuation of political legitimacy and politics in the Kremlin over many years that hasn't been properly spotted by enough commentators. And it's a game that I've played every year during the Putin regime. Is the regime legitimate? Has it ceased to be legitimate? And if so, to what extent? Started playing that game in about 2000. So that's the beginning of a sketch of that conversation. I'm going to bed. Your head has exploded, or you're bored to death if you've survived all of this. Thank you very much. Lots of love. Talk very soon.